Good morning, first graders. My name is Miss Munoz, and you kind of met me in my introduction video, but today we are going to be teaching about comparing objects. Remember in my video I talked about two colors. We have a red, which I will be using when I am writing, and I want you just to watch. So usually when I use the red, you're not going to have the problem I'm doing, so you're just going to watch me do something. I'm also going to use a green pen sometimes. Whatever I use the green pen, I want you to write what I'm writing. Sometimes I might be going so fast that you need to stop the video to get caught up. That's okay. But everything I write with this green pen, I want you to have on your paper. Okay, so today we're on page 43 of your student journal. And our goal today, or our objective, is today I will compare the length of two objects by using a third object to make an indirect comparison. Okay, so what that means is we're going to be comparing three objects, but we're only really going to be using two and making a final statement. It sounds pretty tricky, but I promise you when we practice it, it'll be a little bit easier. Okay, so I'm not going to worry about our vocabulary, but we are going to look at our steps because I'm going to use these today when I practice. It says we're first going to number the objects from shortest to longest. Okay, well, that's going to work sometimes, but that's only if our problem says they want us to talk about the shortest. Sometimes we're going to do longest to shortest. And we're going to know if we do longest to shortest or shortest to longest when we look at what the problem's asking us. So if the problem's asking us about short, then we're going to do shortest to longest. But if the problem's asking us about which one's longer, then we're going to do longest to shortest. So we're going to have to really work on this. This is going to be our first step that we're going to have to pay close attention to. Then we're going to compare the first object to the second one. So the first to the second. And then we're going to compare the second object to the third object. And then we're going to compare the first to the third. That's a lot of steps, boys and girls. But don't worry, because we're going to do it together. Okay? So before we actually start together, I'm going to do some by myself. So I grabbed my red pen, and I want you just to watch me. Okay, so here's my steps, and here's my first problem. If I look at my problem down here, my problem's talking about shorter, shorter, and shorter. And I'm going to read those in a moment. But because they're talking about short, what I'm going to do with my steps is I'm going to number the objects from shortest to longest because short is the word I'm looking at. So let's look at my objects. Which one's the shortest? These ones are a little tricky because the banana and the football are pretty close, but I think the banana is the shortest, so I'm going to put a 1 there. My football is the second shortest, and my skateboard is the third shortest. So this was the first one. Okay, so now what are we going to do? Now let's look at our next step. I'm going to compare the first object to the second. So here's my first and my second. So when it says the blank is shorter than the blank, I'm going to say the banana because it's my first. And if I'm not sure how to spell it, I can just copy it there. The banana is shorter than the second, which is my football. Okay, so I compared the first to the second. Now let's read our next step. We're going to compare the second object to the third object. So the football is shorter than the skateboard. And is that true, boys and girls? Let's look at that. Is the football shorter than the skateboard? Yes, definitely. So I just compared, this is the shortest, and it's shorter than that. This is the second shortest, it's shorter than that. This was the little one that gets a little bit tricky at the end. I'm sorry if I didn't show that to you, boys and girls. Okay, the end says, I'm going to indirectly compare the first object to the third. Well, this time we're going to compare the first object to the third. So is, therefore the banana is shorter than the skateboard. Is that true? Is the banana shorter than the skateboard? Definitely. It's definitely shorter. The banana is shorter than the skateboard. That's a lot of remembering how to follow all those numbers. But then you would just look at this to follow this. Okay, let's try another one. Now look at these problems. These problems are asking about longer, 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 longer. So here in step 1, I'm going to number the objects from longest to shortest. That's what I'm going to do, from longest to shortest. So which one's my longest? The bike is my longest. Then my shoe, and then my horn. So this is the longest one. Okay, so now let's look at our next step. Compare the first object to the second object. So I'm going to compare the first object to the second. So I'm going to say the bicycle, which is my first object, is longer than the shoe, which is my second object. Okay, then I'm going to compare the second object to the third object. Okay, so the shoe is longer than the horn. Okay, now let's look at our last step. I'm going to indirectly compare the first object with the third. So my first object and my third object. So the bicycle is longer than the horn. Of course, look at that. It's much longer than the horn. Let's try some together now, boys and girls. So I'm going to put down my red pen, and I want you to join me now on page 44. Okay, ready? So here's our pictures. We have a feather, we have a phone, and we have a bandage. Kind of like a Band-Aid, but they're calling it a bandage. Let's look at our questions. Our questions are talking about the word shorter. I want you to underline that. Shorter, shorter. So that means we're going to start with the shortest. So which one of these is the shortest? I think the bandage is my shortest. Which one's the second shortest? Can we say our phone is the second shortest and our third is the feather? Okay, so we're going to start with the phone first. And if I need a check, I can look here. What do? Compare the first object to the second object. Ready? So I'm going to compare the first to the second object. So the bandage is shorter than the phone. Is that true? Is the bandage shorter than the phone? Definitely. It's much shorter. Okay, let's look at our next step. I'm going to compare the second object to the third object. So now they want me to compare the second object to the third object. Okay, so the phone is my second object, is shorter than the feather. Is that true, boys and girls? Is the phone shorter than the feather? Yes, it's a lot shorter. Look how much longer this is. It's all that much longer. Okay, let's look at our next step. I'm going to indirectly compare the first object with the third object. So the first with the third. So let's look at that. So now they want me to do the first and the third. Okay, so let's look. The bandage is my first, right? So therefore, the bandage is shorter than the, what's my third one? My feather. And is that true, boys and girls? Is the bandage shorter than the feather? Definitely. Okay, let's try another one. Let's turn our page. And this time we have a battery, a bandage, and a marker. Let's look at what our question's asking us. Ooh, I see longer, longer, and longer. So this time, we're going to look at the longest because they're talking about long. So which one of our objects is the longest? I hope you said the marker. Which one of these is the second longest? The bandage. And what's our third longest? Battery. Okay, I'm going to try not to flip to my notes and see if I remember. So what they want me to do first is compare the first one with the second one. So the marker is longer than the bandage. Okay, then they want me to compare the second one to the third one. The bandage is longer than the battery. Then they want me to compare the first one to the third one. So the marker, which is my first one, is longer than my battery. Let's read those, boys and girls, and see if we agree. Is the marker longer than the bandage? Yes. Is the bandage longer than the battery? Yes. Therefore, the marker is longer than the battery. That's true. Okay, so boys and girls, you're going to use yours, and now you're going to try quite a few pages on your own. You could use your notes to help you or the ones we did together. Have a good afternoon, boys and girls, and thanks for doing math with me. I will see you tomorrow. Bye.